Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover analysis for the full moon or Purnima that's happening next week, 30th of August 2023. And I think the general theme of that event is rising like a lotus flower. So let's go ahead. Note as always, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And then you might take a minute to read the rest of this disclaimer. Another thing, if you're new to Vedic Astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist. Whenever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means that there's a teaching video on that subject. So if I start talking about something, you're like, what's bala? And you see a double asterisk, there's a video on that, so you can go check that out. And if you're a beginner, again, with Vedic astrology or Jyotish, you might watch these videos. So I think there's 5 of them. Introduction to constellations, different style Indian charts, introduction to navigating a birth chart, the Lagna, planetary aspects, because that's the basis of my analysis. So if I start talking about aspects and you're like, what's an aspect? You might get confused or lost. So the other thing is that in this particular talk, I'm talking about many planets, but especially the moon. So I have a whole playlist, Planets Graha's playlist, where you can see. I go into depth on each planet and what they represent. And I think I have all of them except Rahu and K2 now, so you can check that out. All right, so here's the chart for the full moon on 30th of August. Oh, by the way, I'm doing this chart separately. I usually include it in my monthly transit videos, but I realized after I posted my last monthly transit videos that I missed this date because there were actually, in most months, there's one full moon and one new moon, and then this happened right before the end of the month to be another full moon. So I realized that only after I posted the video. Whenever I catch mistakes like that, I put a note in the description box if I've posted a video, because again, my videos are so long and they're like 2, 3 hours long. It's just not feasible to go back and redo the whole thing. So if I recognize any mistakes, I put notes in the description box. All right, so let's get into this. Okay, so let's just look at the timing here a little bit. So the Dasha period here is Rahu, Mercury, Venus. So Rahu represents things like sun communication. Mercury represents things like, excuse me, Rahu represents things that are sudden. Mercury represents things like communication. Venus represents things like loved ones. So just that in and of itself, you might get some idea that there's a sun communication with or by a loved one. The day lord is Mercury, so it's kind of a mixed day, mixed energy for the day. The Hurrah or Hour Lord is the moon. So, already we've got the day lord is Mercury, the mind, rational mind. The hour lord is the moon or the kind of intuitive mind. The moon nakshatra is a lunar mansion. The moon is in Satabhisha, which translates as 100 healers. And the Lagna or rising sign nakshatra is Ashwini, which is a pair of the Ashwini Kumaras, Ashwini twins, they're celestial healers. So just with the moon and Mercury, or excuse me, the Lagna and moon being in Satabhisha and Ashwini, that's already a lot of healing energy in this moment of time. And if this was a person's chart, there'd be a lot of healing energy. Um, the Tithi, the first one, so we're right after the apex of the full moon, Pratipada, which is generally a positive Tithi. It's a kind of rise, which actually corresponds with other things in this chart. And it's also a Nanda Tithi, so it's a joyful thing. So even though there's some intensity in the chart, we'll see in other ways that this quality of joy actually translates through more of the chart. And then we're in the Krishna Paksha or the dark, we're starting to get into the waning part of the moon cycle. The Karana or the half tithi is 3 Balava, and the energy there is rebellion, which we'll see corresponds with other aspects of the other features of the chart. Um, and the yoga for timing is 7 Sukarma, which is a noble. So there's even though there's intensity and there's some tension in this chart, overall it seems like um, good things are coming about from this energy here. All right. So as always, I tend to start in the first house. That's the rising sign, Lagna, Ascendant. They're all different names for the same thing. So if you look at the top diamond here, this is a North Indian style chart. The Lagna is Aries or Mesha. Mesha is Sanskrit for Aries. So it's an Aries Lagna. So Aries is a movable sign, so it's a very active energy here. And it's also a fire sign, which is fire is also very movable. So this is a very active, if this is a person. The Lugnatia, or the ruler of that sign, and actually which also ends up being the ruler of the whole chart, is Mars. So Mars is a planet that's fiery. It symbolizes things like leader, innovator, pioneer. And Mars has gone to the sixth house. Of things like that, and the sixth house represents things like deaths, enemies, lawsuits, routines, and acute illness, that sort of thing. So, again, if this was a person, this is somebody who would be kind of prone to erratic behavior and maybe mood and stuff like that. Um, and this person's like interested in things that are like kind of, crisis moments or emergency moments, that sort of thing is what I'm seeing here. Mars aspects to different houses. It has a special aspect, and I just did a whole video on aspects. So if you want to know about aspects, you got a whole video on it now. So Mars has a special aspect 4 houses away into the ninth house, 7 houses, full aspect into 7 houses away, which is the 12th house here, and another special aspect 8 houses away. So Mars going over to ninth house, this kind of tendency for this type of person to again get involved with sort of crisis management is what I'm seeing here. They can definitely bring up tests of faith because there's a lot that this person has to endure and go through. Although what I'm seeing here is that this person tends to enjoy it. So because Mars is in the nakshatra of Uttara Phalguni, and Uttara Phalguni has the symbol of that is a hammock. So you're swinging your hammock, you're enjoying yourself, and the nakshatra right before Purva Phalguni is also symbolized by a hammock, and both of them have this energy of like enjoyment, relaxation, fun, socializing, that sort of thing. The difference being that Uttara Phalguni also has the added component of having like a purpose or a mission. So, this person, most likely involved in some sort of crisis management, likes it and feels driven, purposeful and fulfilled by it. But it can bring up issues. One of them, again, being potentially a test of faith. Um, the other thing is that Mars aspects in the 12th house, which indicates potentially things like not only obvious enemies, which is the 6th house, but hidden enemies. So this person, because they're a mover and shaker, there's probably obvious enemies to their right and left, and then hidden enemies, in the shadows. Because they're kind of up front and large, looks like. So, let's see. And then the other thing that's important is that Mars aspects into the first house, which it owns. So, what that means is this person is going to have strength of personality, strength of body. So, whatever this rock and roll scenario is they're involved in, looks like again like crisis management, and they're going to have some endurance to actually achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. Yeah, so that's the Mars, the Lugnatia. Um, so let's go to the first house and see what else is going on here besides knowing it's an Aries Lugna and Mars is the ruler of that sign as well as the whole chart. So in the first house, besides having Mars aspect into it, giving it strength, not only giving the first house strength, the first house represents things like personality and body, um, and fame, actually. It also because the first house is strong, that means that the rest of the chart will be strong as well. So that's important to know. So the nakshatra for the ascendant nakshatra is Ashwini, which has this energy. Again, the Ashwini Kumara, they're the celestial healers, physicians, and the symbol there is a horse, the head of a horse. So somebody who's pioneering, rescuer, a healer, that sort of thing. And Rahu, the north node of the moon, is also an Ashwini. Rahu represents things like ambition and drive. Jupiter is also here. Jupiter is in Bharani nakshatra. Bharani nakshatra represents the womb, so you get cycles of birth and death because Jupiter is a natural benefic. I would side more on the birth side of that symbol rather than the death side of that symbol. And Jupiter is quite strong because it has bala or directional strength. Jupiter can bring in things like wisdom, spirituality, as well as the law. Um, um, yeah, and then this wisdom spirituality piece, because Jupiter has a special aspect 9 houses away, it aspects into the ninth house of Sagittarius, which it owns. So we're going to bring even more, that's going to strengthen the ninth house of spirituality. So, again, what I'm seeing here is that, again, there's some sort of leader who's quite strong, has endurance, enjoys what they do, has a sense of purpose, but it's a pretty intense personality as well as looks like lifestyle. Because again, Mars in the sixth house also represents sixth house also represents things like routines, and Mars is a planet that represents it has sort of an erratic energy because Mars travels erratically in the sky, and so there can be this like start and stop energy. Um, so that might be an issue. At least with their routines. One thing that keeps that from happening with the whole person, the whole personality, is that we have Saturn sitting here in the 11th house in Aquarius, its own sign retrograde. So you have this massive Saturn who's aspecting the first house as well. So that means that this person is not only going to have drive, but they're also going to have stamina. So they're going to be like a athlete, and maybe not like not an actual athlete per se, but this is somebody who's going to like go and go and go, like the Energizer Bunny. That's what this. Okay. Also, when you have Mars aspecting into a house where Jupiter is, this is also somebody who potentially uses their voice, like an advocate type person. It could be a singer, potentially, but I think what I'm seeing here is more like it can also represent law. And I see here because Mars and Jupiter also both aspect the ninth house, which can represent government and authority. I think this person might be involved in law, potentially law enforcement or a lawyer. That's possible. Um, it could also be actually this if this was a person, it could also be because Rahu's here. Rahu not only represents ambition, but it can represent things that are unusual. So this might be an unusual type of healer. Maybe somebody who's an alternative medicine, maybe who's somebody who's a spiritual kind of a spiritual warrior type, like a yoga teacher or some other sort of spiritual teacher or leader. That could be as well. Um, so yeah, when you take all this together, Rahu, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn in the first house, what I'm seeing here is that there's a birth or rise of a new leader, commander in chief, CEO type person. And this is something they've been striving for. So it's not like it just fell in their lap. They've been working hard at this, trying to get here. And it's something that's going to be in the public eye, which we'll see there's more confluence on that in the rest of the chart and other parts of the chart. So there's going to be sudden, what do they call it? Leveling up or promotion or moment when this person steps forward into the public eye. And yeah, one thing to note also about the chart generally is that there's a Saraswati yoga. Saraswati yoga is specific placements when Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury are placed in a certain way. And so Saraswati yoga for the whole chart indicates that things like education and creativity are important for this person. So this is going to be, again, potentially an educator or somebody who brings creativity to what they do. So let's go around the rest of the chart. So if we go from the first chart, the second house is fairly quiet. It's Taurus, second house, ruled by Venus. Third house is also fairly quiet. It's Gemini, it's ruled by Mercury. But the fourth house, there's a little bit here. So the fourth house generally indicates things like home, mother, ancestors. And the sign here, the constellation Rashi, is Cancer or Karka. So Cancer is a water sign. That means that this is an emotional place. And Cancer people, if we were talking about a Cancer person, they tend to be quite smart, but also very emotional. And so when they get stressed out, their emotions tend to override their intellect. Um, the other thing is that the one of the symbols of Karka or Cancer is a crab. So on the outside, they might seem like they have a bit of hard shell, but inside they're quite soft. So they tend to be fairly sensitive, emotional, even homebody type people. Um, so that's home or mother ancestors for this person if it was a person. And we have Venus here. Venus is a planet that represents things like spouse or spouse-like relationship, or at least a loved one. Um, Venus is retrograde. That means it's strong. It gives it strength. It also has directional strength, dig bala, much like Jupiter. So that's gonna give it additional strength. So there are two primary strengths that Venus has. It happens to be in the nakshatra of Aslesha. So Aslesha is symbolized by a snake, and so when we have Venus and Aslesha, we can get things like sensuality, sexuality, healing of relationships, healing of loved one. And so when I put all this together here, it looks like, again, there's more healing energy, but it's a little bit different from what I've talked about so far. Venus is isolated here. It's not aspecting or being aspected by any other planets. So, what I would gather from this is that there's somebody. So, I don't know if this is you. I don't know if you're the Mars who's like, leveling up and breaking through and having a shining moment, or if it's maybe some loved one in your life. But the thing is, because they've been so focused on this, looks like some sort of professional achievement, it may be that there's strain on the relationship because there's so much energy and erratic mood, behavior, routines. It's hard. Again, Venus is kind of off and isolated from the rest of all this action going on here. So Venus is kind of out of the loop, really. Um, so Venus is strong. They're holding strong, but looks like they're at home or in their own little emotional cave, healing or balancing themselves. So it looks like there's some, tension there, and it looks like there's also now that this has happened, whatever this shining breakthrough moment is, after all this hard work, this kind of breaking through. Hopefully, that means that there's some opportunity here to reconnect with this person, partner, loved one, and bring some balance because Venus is in the fourth house of home and Venus has a direct aspect in the 10th house of career. It looks like it might be time to rethink work life balance and balance between self and others. Yeah. The fifth house, if we move on to the fifth house, that's Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun, and sun is in its own house here. So the fifth house is going to be strong. The fifth house represents things like intellect, teaching, counseling, creativity, and the stage. And since sun is in its own sign here, it's, that's can indicate like a kind of a royalty or king-like energy. And this is of the mind, but also this could be who somebody advises. So you might, if this is you again, or your loved one, somebody you know is going through that, has this energy going on. They either are kind of advising themselves on how to level up into a prominent position, or they're advising prominent people in positions of power. Um, so sun is Swa, that means it's in its own sign. In Magha, Magha is a nakshatra that's symbolized by a throne. So again, you get more of that royalty energy besides sun on its own as a planet representing things like the king or that kind of position. And again, it doesn't have to be male. You can have a female king. They might have a slightly more kind of masculine energy, but by all means, right? It doesn't necessarily equate with the physical body of somebody, the physical biological body of somebody. We also have Mercury retrograde here, so the retrograde gives Mercury some strength. Mercury's in Purva Phalguni, so I mentioned briefly before. The Phalgunis, the symbol of that is a hammock, the good life, relaxing, enjoyment, that sort of thing. So again, this person, their thought process is that they enjoy being in charge, is what I'm saying here. Um, the thing though is that there's sort of like side effects or collateral damage that happens because of this, it looks like. So because we have Saturn aspect, and you see this long navy arrow coming from the opposite house, Saturn aspects on here. Saturn is a planet that represents things like delays, obstacles, and again, it could be bureaucracy. So again, when you have Sun and Saturn together like this, that could be government again. Um, the moon is here. So we have Mercury and moon here together. So Mercury represents the rational mind. Moon represents the intuitive mind, the sensorial mind. So again, there's this kind of restructuring of the mindset here, both the intuition as well as the decision making, to become more of uh, it could be like a politician, bureaucrat, some higher up person in the government. And Leo as a sign represents things like the stage. So this is again going to be something that's in the public eye. So we have more of that. So whatever this person is going through, you or somebody else that you know, it's going to be pretty obvious. What else is aspecting this fifth house? So we talked about Saturn, we talked about Moon, Jupiter again. Jupiter represents things like the law, and Rahu. So again, this ambition drive. So actually, we have Sun and Mercury in the fifth house, but we have four other planets aspecting here as well. So this fifth house is going to be crucial for this person. It's going to be all about advising, create, and again, it's the fifth house of creativity, and this person is a Saraswati yoga. So there's some sort of creative advising about really kind of restructuring thoughts and how decisions are made. And that's what I'm seeing here. And also communication. Mercury represents communication. So either being advised or advising the king, quote unquote king, high level official on restructuring the mind and communication. And we talked about the sixth house already. Mars is there, enemies, routines, that sort of thing, lawsuits. The seventh house is also interesting. So this gives me again more info on this whole, Venus isolated out of the loop situation. So the seventh house represents things like primary relationships, spouse-like relationships, spouse, that sort of thing. It can also indicate independent business. We have K2 here, which is a planet that represents things like things that are hidden, but also it can be a separation type energy. So this might be that there's again like a separation between your loved one, Venus, whoever your Venus person is, or it could be that maybe this endeavor um, or moment or event that's happening, maybe it's taking you away from some independent business thing that you have going on. And K2 is in Chitra. Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone, and so the gemstone is all about like structure. So there's some sort of unusual structure, and again, it might be because of this event, because you can see K2 is in third degree, 12 minutes. So K2 and Rahu are actually shifting signs at the end of October. So this might be kind of a temporary situation, even though it seems like it might be taking forever. And I'll talk about why that is when we get to the 11th house. But it looks like this is an acute situation, although it might seem like it's taking for longer than you like. Um, but K2 will be shifting out of here at the end of October. The other thing is Mars, as I mentioned, is in the sixth house of acute illnesses, accidents, situations. So um, there's a lot of energy going here, but hopefully that also means that there's some opportunity to kind of heal the, again, collateral damage that might have happened with relationships and other activities in one's life, like an independent business or something like that. What else? So K2 is in the seventh house. We do have Jupiter aspecting the seventh house. That's that saffron arrow pointing down. And again, Jupiter is a benefic planet. So when you have K2 and Chitra and Jupiter and Bharani, in this seventh house, um, and the seventh house is ruled by Venus. So, again, if we spin this chart around and make the seventh house the first house, what that means is it looks like Venus is not only at home, but they're off working in their own things while you're busy doing this, or while they're doing all this, you're like at home, and working on your own thing quietly, kind of out of the loop on all this, that this other person's going through. So that also gives some hope with this Jupiter here, because Jupiter's going to go retrograde soon, and Jupiter is going to be shining into the seventh house until I think May of next year. So the next couple months might still, might need to do some recon work to get your relationship or independent business back online. Now that this breakthrough has happened, although, we all know how it goes when you get into something new. It takes a little bit of time and energy, but the thing is, it's like, again, that's why I think this Venus is indicating that some work-life balance is probably important, because there's so much energy going into whatever this thing is. It's almost at the exclusion of all other facets of life. Okay, so we talked about the ninth house. The ninth house represents things like government, authority, father, spirituality. We have Rahu aspecting in here. We have Jupiter aspecting here. We have Mars aspecting in here. So again, ambition, law, enthusiasm. So there's for government authority. So this person really wants to um, rise up and level up. So they're doing that, but again, they probably want to consider other facets of their life, so they don't get the other aspects of their life don't get neglected or trampled. Um, and what else was I going to say? No, I think that's good. Okay, and then we move on to the 11th house here. We have Saturn and Moon both in Satabhisha, which I think I mentioned translates as 100 healers. So the moon represents the intuitive mind or sensory mind, and Saturn represents things like obstacles, delays, that sort of thing, structure. And you can see Saturn is aspecting three houses away. It has a special aspect, so that's gonna bring its energy. And Saturn is super strong right now in its own house of Aquarius retrograde. I mean, that's as strong as you can get. Um, so all that strong Saturnian structural delay energy is shining onto the Lagna. It's shining into the fifth house of intellect. So the first house of personality, the fifth house of intellect, and the 10 houses away for Saturn is the eighth house here. The eighth house represents deep psychology. So so whatever this event is really taking a toll on the mind. It's restructuring the mind. It's and the thing is, the moon is full here. It's a full moon. That's nice. There's a lot of energy, brightness, light in the moon. Generally, that's a good thing, but you have this massive Saturn on it. So that's going to dim all that enjoyment, all that culmination energy. Um, And you have Saturn not only on Moon, the intuitive mind, but Mercury, the rational mind, as well as decision making. So it looks like decisions, especially for other aspects of life, have been put on hold to make whatever this has happen. Um, and again, if this was a birth chart for somebody, not just a moment in time, when Saturn is in the sign before, in the sign before, of, or after the moon, it's a 7.5 year period called Sadhisati. That means this person would be born into Sadhisati. Sadhisati is often feared by many people. Um, it can bring a lot of restructuring of life, of one's life. Typically, it's different for different people. It's not all bad. But typically, what happens, which is the disruptive part for people, is that they tend to lose pretty important support structures in their life. So maybe it was a grandparent, parent, that sort of thing. Um, and again, when we see people born into Sadhisati, that can mean that those kind of delays or circumstances that brought the person down early in life tend to color that person's view of life. So that can happen. And the 11th house, in addition to that, represents things like income. Saturn is also the lord of the 10th house of career. So this person is, you know, making money, driving income from this activity, whatever they're involved in. So again, it looks like some kind of work thing. Um, but the 11th house is also clubs, groups, and society. So when we look on the 5-11 axis here, we have again the sun that's Swa in the 5th house with Mercury. We have Saturn, Swa retrograde in the 11th house with Moon. Again, this when we bring this all together, integrate it, there's this energy of advising leadership on how to shift or change mental structure, communication, decisions to bring people up. Yeah. So this could be like, how do we do crisis management, but actually a little bit more prophylactically, right? Rather than go and like set fires out, how do we get people to how do we get people to stop creating fires in the first place, right? So it's like what we talk about in karma. You hear karma, the word karma tossed around all the time, especially in Western society, pretty loosely. It's like, oh, this person has good karma, this person had bad karma, that sort of thing. But karma at a base level just means action. And so sometimes people interpret karma as just things that you do. But to get to a place where you do something, you first need the energy, the seed of that action in your mind. So that's why when we talk about rectifying karma with somebody or somebody's chart, we want to the best way to deal with karma is to deal with the seeds of karma in the mind. If you don't have the seed of negative seed of karma in your mind, then you can't say negative things, which is a type of action, and you can't do negative things like steal money from somebody. So maybe this person, especially since they're spiritual, maybe they would be leading or discussing, be an advocate for how do we change people's minds on a deep level to shift society, right? Because again, clubs, group society, that sort of thing. So that's a pretty deep mission, but again, it looks like it's all consuming for this person, whoever they are. And again, it looks like there might be problems with other relationships or trouble at home a little bit because again they're absent because they're so consumed and involved with this. Although it looks like it's a shining moment and it's an enjoyable moment, but again, if somebody's looking for balance in their life, then they might want to regroup a little bit and see how they can keep going forward because it looks like this is some noble action that they're involved in. It's just the people around them, they're loved ones and their deep supporters might feel out of the loop and like they've kind of lost you, that sort of thing. All right, so that's the full moon. That's what I saw there. So as always, I want to thank you for your time. All my teaching videos again are my concepts playlist if you're interested in learning more about Vedic astrology. If you're interested in individual birth chart readings on Zoom, I do that. I do offer that, and you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. I have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, and which involves discussions on things like Ayurveda and yoga, other Vedic arts, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine, and that's called Nature Source Care. So I hope this gives you some insights into the energy coming up with the full moon next week, and hopefully it also helps you navigate your way through those energy cycles. Right. Until next one, take care. Namaste.